I just want to say it's such a honor to be up here, not only because my dad could have asked 50 different people in this room alone. That would have been a huge honor. So for him to let me do this was really nice. And as RJ said, I did follow him into radio. And really, I had a choice growing up to follow everyone in my family in teaching, pretty much. Our family get-togethers are like a bad PTA meeting, honestly. Turns out, though, I am not teacher material. It's probably why I followed my dad around everywhere. I was that kid. Remotes, concerts, kitchen, the radio station, that's me. That's where I was. That's probably how I got the nickname Jim Mantel's daughter. To this day, record reps, artists refer to me, "Oh, you're Jim Mantel's daughter." It goes to show, though, how much of an impact that my dad's had in this industry, or just how little they really want to learn my name. I told myself when I got into this business, I said, if I could be half as successful as my dad, I would consider myself very accomplished in the business. And now he's going into the Hall of Fame, so he's really pushing me. I'm still working on a CMA award, as RJ said, in Buffalo, at WIRK, with Claydale and Liz. It's in Buffalo, Claydale and Liz, WIRK. No, he did teach me, though. It's never been about awards for him, and I think that's really where I took my lesson. I think the moment that I realized that he was actually a good person, and not just in it for the awards. It was a promotion called Christmas Break-Ins in Cleveland. A simple concept. You have people submit families that are down on their luck that year. Maybe their parents lost their job and they really couldn't afford to have a Christmas. And then, you pick a family and you ask listeners to, donate presents, food, whatever, to have a Christmas. And then they break into the house, they set everything up without them knowing, and they leave. Simple as that. They get to have a Christmas. But what really got me is I was helping him one year. We were wrapping up presents, and at the end he goes, "Oh, we don't have enough." So I went to the store with him, and he dropped money. Gaming systems, winter clothes, whatever they needed, and wrapped them up and took them in. But even more than that, there was no afterglow. They didn't go on the radio and say, "Look what we did." The whole point was to let someone have a Christmas and not anybody know who did it. And that's really great, because that's showing that it's not about the glory, it's about being involved in the community. And the family never knew it was my station, or it was my dad. They never knew it was the station, but they got to have a Christmas this year, and that went on to be, I think, one of his favorite promotions that he did in Cleveland. And that's what he prides himself on. It's the work that he did with the Cleveland Police, Harvest for Hunger, St. Jude, and his current work with the military in North Carolina. It's not lip service either. It's being cognizant about what's around you. It's about showing up, coming up with creative ideas to raise money, awareness, or honor those involved. And his connection with his listeners blows my mind. The commitment that they have to him is like no other. And I think his current streaming numbers will show that. And while they don't count for ratings, they do count to his family and they count to him, especially if those people are willing to suffer through buffering and outdated PSAs just to listen to him in another state. My dad always told my sister Kristen and me growing up that you should always leave things better than you found them. And I think it's safe to say that, Dad, that you will leave this industry better than you found it. It is my great honor to ask you to join me in welcoming the newest member of the Country Radio Hall of Fame, Liz Mantel's father, Jim Mantel.
sit down. Nobody is more shocked, despite all of that, than me. I know there's some people that are equally as shocked as me, but nobody is more shocked than me. Bill White likes to tell the story about growing up and working in a cow pasture radio. Mel was talking about being there as a guy. I wasn't that guy. I was always fascinated by radio, but I was an auto mechanic. I was an HVAC technician. I was a cutter grinder. 8 hours behind a machine when you have ADD is not a good job. Thanks to modern technology, I now have HD ADD though, so that's kind of cool. The kids think it's cool anyway. But I was always, during all those jobs, I was listening to the radio, and there was a morning show in Cleveland, Jeff Kinsbach and Ed Flash Ferentz, and I kept listening to them through all my jobs going, I'm a smartass, I can do that. And so after I got married, with some encouragement from my wife. It's the breaker. That's right. Where's John? Anyway, with some encouragement from my wife, I went to school to learn how to do radio. And next thing we know, we were moving to Texas. And I'm in my 4th decade now of not working for a living. It's a whole lot of fun every day. Sure, there's some trying times, but for the most part, this is fun. My very first ever morning show partner in West Texas, Dana Carroll, who was inducted here last year with her late husband, Mike. Her life got infinitely better when I quit, because Mike got hired to replace me. She met and got to work with the love of her life and made it into the Hall of Fame before me. So, there was a guy that I worked with out there, though. His name was Max Howard. Max was older. I had become the operations manager, program director, doing the morning show. And Max was technically my employee, except Max at one point was 1/3 owner of the radio station that I was now operations, so I'm not going to tell Max anything. We shared an office, and one day Max gave me a piece of advice that I've never forgotten. I'd gotten a phone call with somebody telling me something about how good they liked something that we did or something, and Max said, you know, you're going to hear a lot of that. Let me tell you something. He said, you'll let that go to your head, and that won't do you any good. He said, if radio waves stopped transmitting tomorrow morning, people would still figure out how to get to work, and figure out how to get their kids dressed, get out the door, get everything done. If the guy that comes around once a week and picks up the trash stops coming around, we're all screwed. He's more important than you are. Don't ever forget, and I've never forgotten those words from Max. Everybody's talked about the people around them that made them better, and I've done this for a long time. This is my 6th radio station that I'm at now, and 3 of those radio stations accounted for about 4 years. So the rest of the time has been at 3 radio stations. Along the way, I have, and I'm going to read these names so I don't forget anybody, I have had the privilege of learning from Ted Stecker, Rusty Walker, Bob Moody, Joel Rabb, who must have done something awful in a previous life because he's stuck with me for the 2nd time. Meg Stevens, Clay Honeycutt, Dean Howland, Brian Jennings, Kevin Matheny, Keith Abrams, Denny Nugent, Jay Albright, and Lee Randall. That's a Hall of Fame crew right there. And that's not the people I worked with, that's just the people I've learned from. I've worked with so many talented people over the years that made me so much better. And I don't know if everybody has a point where their career turned on a dime. I remember mine. I'd been about 7 years into radio. I'd become the operations manager, the program director, blah. I wasn't making any more money. And so many times I heard from my wife, you stay home and deal with the kids. I'll get up in the middle of the night and go drink coffee, read the newspaper, and crack jokes. So I knew I had higher aspirations and I wanted more out of this, and I wasn't real sure how to get it. So I took money, again with her encouragement, that we didn't have. And I went to a Joel Denver radio personality seminar in Dallas. It was February 1989. And it was tables for 2 in there. I don't remember anything in particular that I learned. I know it was beneficial, but the guy that was sitting at the table with me was the only one in the room with a laptop computer. I'd never seen one before. Even in 1989, the new night jock at the Eagle, Kid Craddock, was way ahead of everybody else. And Kid made such a difference not only in my career, but in so many others. So I met Kid, and that was also the reason I remember it so well was I met Kid, but more importantly, it was the weekend that they fired Tom Landry in Dallas, and there I was. So the next morning, Sunday morning, was all the morning shows that were in there, figuring out what they were going to do the next day, which was kind of cool to be a part of. And that's when I met two other people that are still friends of mine, Steve Harmon and Scott Evans, Harmon and Evans of KPLX. And Steve has been like a brother to me for years. He's talked me off several ledges. He's given me a lot of good advice, some not so good advice. So fast forward 2.5, 3 years, now I'm at WGAR in Cleveland, and I get a call from Kid Craddock, who started this thing called Bitboard. And he's looking for some of the premier country air talent to kick off a country version of this. To which my reaction was, hang on, Kid Craddock thinks I'm one of the top? Holy cow. Again, Steve Harmon told him that, so I wasn't the only one that Steve gave some shaky advice to along the way. But, and I think that Bill would attest to this, that through that, we became a group of people who shared ideas. And instead of working on your own and having 1, 2, maybe 3 great ideas a week, you had 6 or 7 every day. Because we were sharing, the people that I met and became friends with, in addition to Bill White, Skip Mahaffey, Tom and Joe Johnson, Tony and Chris, Tony Lynn, J.J. Christie, J.D. Pelletier, Ben and Brian, and not just in the country genre, but then we had conventions, and we would get together with people like Paul Castronova, Ace and TJ, Dwyer and Michaels, Jeff and Jared, Spike O'Neill and Bob Rivers, you know, some incredible talent, and share ideas, and that elevated everybody's game, and it also gave those of us in country an eye into how rock stations did stuff, and some of the stuff that they were doing that we could get away with, we just had to turn it a little bit. We couldn't be as rank as they were, but we could certainly, you know, blow stuff up. And so along the way, I've shut down an airport, dumped bowling balls out of the back of a cement mixer to pick lottery numbers, which, by the way, if you've never seen a bowling ball come out of it, and they don't come out one at a time, they come out 3 and 4 at a time. It's about 13 foot in the air, and those things bounce. And of course, I was like Marlon Perkins. I'm up in the studio on the air. Meanwhile, I've got producers and interns down there trying to corral bowling balls like Jim Fowler wrestling the alligator. It's hysterical to do stuff like that. We one time tried to give away, we had a contest to give away a free funeral to the first drunk driver killed on New Year's Eve. I didn't plan on telling this story, but since I got your reaction, I will. This is the power of radio. I worked for a guy, he was an alcoholic, but he realized, this is back in the 80s when drunk driving was becoming a national concern. So George came up with the idea of starting a thing called Tipsy Taxi. It was a 24/7, 365-day-a-year free ride program. We got bars to sponsor it. If you were drunk, they would call the radio station, we would send a cab to pick you up, they would take you home. At the end of the month, we divided the cab bill among the bars, and the most it ever cost any bar, I think, was $13 in 1 month. So now we started this in like April or May. And it's about November, so the newness had worn off, and we're sitting there shooting the breeze one day, and George said something along the lines, we gotta do something to kick this Tipsy Taxi thing off. Kick it up a notch. And J.J. McLean was walking down the hall and he said, what you ought to do is give a free funeral when the first drunk driver killed on New Year's Eve. And everybody said, just what you did. And I went, J.J., that's freaking brilliant. So what we did, and the lawyers were nuts about this, we put $3,500 in an escrow for it, that's what a funeral would cost. And we went on the air just like every other radio contest, and we said, we're going to give a free funeral away to the first drunk driver killed on New Year's Eve. Well, people were outraged. But what eventually came to be was the message that, look, if you drive drunk, you're going to die, which was counter the actual truth. You know, the drunk usually bounces around inside the car. If you drive drunk, you're going to die. And the bottom line is, we've done everything we can to keep you from driving drunk. If you're that stupid, there's only one thing left for us to do, and that's plant you. So we have this contest. It's called Your Last Contest. Any idiot can win. And we set up the rules, and the first thing we made sure of was we did not want a winner. So we set up the rules so there couldn't be a winner, and it was all very technical, and you had to be killed between 12:01 a.m. and 11:59 p.m. on New Year's Eve, which is not when most people are out driving drunk. You had to pre-register at one of our participating locations. You had to give us the name of next of kin, and they had 24 hours to notify. This is all, we put all this together, then we called the lawyers. The lawyer's like, oh my God. Well, what about, you know, the holidays, depression, what about somebody who's depressed thinking, I've never done anything in my life, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna go out and win. Okay, so we disqualified suicide. then they brought up the euthanasia question. We don't want somebody laying in a hospital and thinking, well, you get a free funeral if we pull the plug. Okay, so now you gotta be dead on the scene or dead on arrival. We had to come up with all this stuff. And I know this sounds terrible, but here's the coup de grace. If two pre-registered drunks hit each other head on and both died on the scene, we'd have a drawing to determine the winner. Now, again, here's the upshot of this stuff. In Ector County, which was Odessa, Texas at the time, they'd had a real drunk driving problem the year before. They had 5 or 6 extra troopers out looking for nothing but drunk. They were looking for taillights. They were looking for drunk drivers. The year before they'd arrested, I forget, it was in the 20s. That year they arrested 4. In Midland County they arrested even fewer than that. We scared the living you know what out of people. So we used the typical radio contest forum and it was tasteless as hell. I'll give you that. And we let that fester for about a week before we actually told them what we were doing. So it was stuff like that we did. We were in a really upscale office building in Cleveland, and we had a 5th floor balcony. We threw more stuff off that balcony. Hell, we shot water balloons at an intern with a Pulitzer Prize winning author, Dave Barry. I don't know why, other than it was fun, but I'll tell you, he wrote about it in his column, and I think that's better than CMT. We brought a Bengal tiger, we brought a horse into that building, basically driving the building manager nuts. I remember the veins popping out of her neck and her yelling at one of my interns that she ran the building and not me. And the other thing that was really unique about Cleveland is that we're 99.5. 90 miles away is Detroit, where there was also a 99.5. How that happened, it goes way back. So our signals met over the lake. Well, when high pressure would set in, you're familiar with signals that skip. Our signals would skip across the lake. So on the Michigan side, they would hear our station from Cleveland, and on the Cleveland side, we would hear the Detroit station. And the longer the high pressure sat in, the further that crept inland. Our studios were 4.5, 5 miles from the lake. Most of the time during the summer, there were weeks at a time, we couldn't hear ourselves. We would hear the station out of Detroit. We'd have to go into program mode in the studio to hear what was going on in the air. And how we ever got ratings with that situation, I don't know. And what was really funny was if one of the stations would go off the air, the other one would just bomb in. So we would, Don Carpenter was doing morning, another great friend of mine for 20 plus years, and co-conspirator in a lot of bits. We would call the other one on the hotline and say, hey, can you put me on the air so I can tell my listeners what's going on? I don't know how it goes back to the 40s when nobody ever thought FM would amount to anything. And he said, sure, go ahead, put one on there, we don't care. I got to work with some great people in Cleveland. Lucy Grant, who I won the CMA with, Ed Richards, who really taught me how to tell a story, and the late Chuck Collier, who was inducted here several years ago. Chuck was like a brother to me, and when they didn't renew my contract in 2010, Chuck didn't call me for like a week. And he couldn't. And when he did call, all he did was cry. But we had so much fun together. And the one thing that there's a lot of things about Chuck I'll never forget, but the one thing that always sticks with me every time there's an award show and people have touched on it was that when they thanked country radio, that meant a lot to Chuck. And when they didn't thank country radio, that really pissed him off. And so with that in mind, I'd like to thank Nashville and the community of artists that make the music, that are really wonderful people that make it so easy to deal with and relate to the listeners. If there's anything good that's come out of consolidation, it's that other formats got to see how our artists interact with us, because they don't do that in other formats. And they're kind of shocked when Alice Cooper opened a restaurant in downtown Cleveland. Alice Cooper was in the building promoting his restaurant. He talked to the news talk station, he talked to the rock station, he talked to the oldie station, he talked to the music of your ex-wife life station, or as we called them on St. Patrick's Day, the Shamrock station. He wouldn't talk to us because we were country. I'm like, what the hell?
I grew up in the 70s. I bought your records. I probably have more people listening to me that bought your records over the years than any of these other stations. The damn rock station hasn't played your record in 10 years at least. Why won't you? Rascal Flatts is opening a restaurant in Cleveland. I'm pretty sure that if the hip hop and R&B station wants to talk to him, they'll go in and talk to him. He wouldn't talk to us because we were country and he was Alice Cooper. It's just stupid. But I wanted to talk to him about golf. I didn't want to talk to him about music or his restaurant. He's a really good golfer, and I want to be. And finally, I'll wrap this up by talking about my family for a few minutes. My wife, Melinda, we've been together for 35 wonderful years. There was the year in Houston where nobody was happy. She had the two kids to get up, get out of the door, get to school, and for a long time get to work herself because she was making more money than I was. And everything that she's done, as most of you know, is your family is your best source of material. So Beanie Babies, Longaberger baskets, PTA president, making George Strait set up chairs at his own concert because he didn't know who he was, ripping the mirrors off the car, backing out the garage. Even her 40th birthday, she loved cows, so for her 40th birthday I found an FFA kid and paid him $100 to bring 2 cows, put them in the front yard. That was Liz's first live broadcast, by the way. The best part was one of the cows got loose, 6 o'clock in the morning, this guy's chasing a cow through Akron, Ohio. August 19th, 1988, we have it on video. So, nothing I've done without her. I mean, she has been, she kept everything normal in what is a completely abnormal life to make this stuff all relatable. And my kids grew up with the knowledge and threat that anything they did was show prep material. And that's not an easy thing to do when you're a teenager, but that's the best material out there because everybody else is going through the same stuff you are. And if you can bring that to the radio and make it fun and make everybody realize that you're not the only one that's dealing with whatever they're dealing with at the moment, that's what makes you able to make that connection. Most of my family's here, which is really cool to me. My brother Bob and his wife Ida May are here. My sister Janet, her husband Chet, their daughter, my niece Gail, along with some very close friends of ours for almost a quarter of a century now, Gary and Marcy McManus. And I'm sure for them it's equally as shocking because they knew me when I was 18. And I'm pretty sure their expectations weren't this for this guy. Both Melinda's parents have passed away. I'm sure they were just filled with optimism for their daughter's future when the long-haired furnace guy asked if he could marry them, but they got to see us have a lot of years of happiness and success. My mom passed away about 6 years ago, and she was so proud that I was on the radio and that, more importantly, that all of her friends knew that I was on the radio. That was important to her. My dad, my dad loved radio. He grew up through the Depression, and radio was his connection to the world, so he loved radio. And he didn't live to ever see me on the radio. He died when I was working in the machine shop, and that's too bad because in school, I was not a good student in school, despite having an entire family of teachers. I was a teacher's nightmare because I didn't know it at the time, but I was just honing my craft. I was a smartass. I could make people laugh. My dad didn't think I was all that funny. And if he said to me once, I'm not exaggerating, at least 500,000 times, one of these days, that smart mouth of yours is going to get you in trouble. And I only wish he'd lived long enough to see what this mouth actually accomplished. Thank you very much. I'm very honored and humbled to be here.